Hello and welcome to our first tutorial, ballasting track. There are a lot of YouTube videos out there and tutorials on how to ballast track and a lot of different ways of doing it. Not all ways are right or wrong. Every modeler has their own way that works for them. Now personally, on my layout I don't have any roadbed underneath my track. So my track is on straight to my plywood, or in my case MDF. This is prototypical of a logging railway industry, which is what I model, and when I was trying to find tutorials on how to ballast track without any roadbed, I found very little to none, because most modelers do actually use some type of roadbed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly run through how to ballast a track that is straight onto the board with no roadbed underneath it. Very simple process, and like I said, it shares a lot of techniques used by other model railroaders, and very similar to ballasting track with a roadbed. And it's just a couple of subtle differences. So things you'll need before we get started: your ballast. I use the Woodland Scenics medium grey ballast. That's my choice of colour and size. I have a spoon just to spread my ballast. I have a stiff bristle brush to spread the ballast along. My brush is the same width as my track, and that helps. You'll need an eyedropper of any kind, doesn't really matter, or a pipette. You'll need a glue water mix. I use a 50-50 mix of PVA and water. Elmer's glue, white glue, craft glue, wood glue, whatever you call it, same sort of thing. Just a 50-50 mix I found that works best for me. And lastly, some isopropyl alcohol. Now I use 99% isopropyl alcohol because I was able to get a bulk lot quite cheap. As far as I'm aware, any of the percentages of alcohol should work just as well as this. So we'll get started. When the first thing I do when I ballast my track is I start with the middle of the track. Now I've just got my ballast in a container, so it's a little bit easier to use. So what we do is we'll get a spoon with some ballast on it and just spread a line of it down the center of the track. Now it doesn't matter if it's not overly even, if it's heaped up here and there, it doesn't matter, we're going to spread it out anyway. Just ensure that you've got enough in there to be able to get in between all the ties. Now this is where the brush comes in handy with the same thickness as the track. All I do is just brush all the ballast down in between the ties along the track to make sure it's nice and evenly spread. Just like that. Now when it comes to ballast sitting on top of the ties, prototypically guys say, you know, you've got to have clean ties, no ballast sitting on top of it. Yes, that is true, but just keep in mind that in the real life, some railways or most railways aren't perfectly pristinely clean. They may have some ballast sitting on the ties, so it's not a big issue. But to clean your ties off, you can use your finger, run it along, pick up the ballast that way, tweezers or a knife, whatever method you use. What I like to do, and the quickest that I found, is just turning my brush around and using the handle, tapping the rails, just vibrates the ballast back down in between the ties. That's it. So once I've done the middle of the track, I'll do this near side so it's easier to see. This is where it's a little bit different to working with roadbed. And what I do, and I found the easiest way, is to put a heaped amount along the top of the ties, on the tie ends, to cover it, right up against the edge of the rail. So we'll just go all the way along, like so. This is where you get your brush, and we want to brush from the rail edge out to the end of the tie, just revealing the top of the tyres. What this does is still lets you have that little bit of an angle or bevel on your ballast as it comes up to the track by letting it fall away naturally. If you try to brush the length of the track instead of going from the rail out to the tyre edge, this won't work properly. You'll just end up scraping all of your ballast out and making it a little bit messy. There we go. That's all there is to it. So I'll just do the other side now. Again, just a heaped amount of ballast along the rail on top of the tyres, covering the tops of the tyres. And get our brush and just go along the top of the tyres from the rail out to the end, letting the ballast fall away. And leaving it in between each of the tyres. We can give it another tap, make sure there's no ballast sitting on those tie-ins. Now when you get to this stage, it's up to you how far out from your track you want to ballast. In my cases, I always do my scenery before I ballast my track, so that sort of dictates to me how far out I ballast, as I use my ballast to blend my scenery and my track together. Again, your model, your layout, your choice. You can ballast out as far as you like, or keep it as close as you like. The next step is using our alcohol to wet the entire track down. Now, you can use a product called wet water, which is easily made, just using water and some drops of detergent. And what that's designed to do is break the surface tension, soak down through the ballast, to allow your glue to penetrate, make a good tough bond, and ensure that it's all stuck down to your plywood or your roadbed and it doesn't move. The issues that I found using wet water is that I found that although it's designed to break surface tension, when you drop it onto your ballast, it will actually start to float the ballast before it soaks in. If you don't know what I mean by floating the ballast, what happens is that when it drops on, creates a little ball, even for a few seconds, and the ballast will float up into the ball and back out on top of your tyres. Now that ends up making it a little bit messy to clean up in the end, and the alcohol seems to, I found, to soak straight through, leaving the ballast where you've actually put it. So that's why I choose alcohol over wet water. There's a good soaking down. You can see it's just started to come down through the ballast and out onto the board here, so I know that it's now penetrated all the way through. Once we've got it all wet down, we move on to our 50-50 mix of glue and water. Give it a good shake, make sure it's all mixed up. Okay, and just again, using our eyedropper, just run it all the way along our track, over our tyres, and you can see straight away how it just soaks straight into the ballast. And do the sides. Doesn't take that long to ballast. It's not a big job, but if there's one thing you can stress is take your time, get it right and the way that you want it to look, because it's very hard to redo later. Now I just put enough of my glue mix down so that it's just sitting on top of the ballast. That way I know that it's actually penetrated through all of the ballast down to the board, and it's going to give me a good hard bond. I leave it dry for 24 hours and then I come back, make sure that it's all fixed down and in place. If I need to add a little bit more of the white glue mix, I will. But other than that, that's really all there is to it. And you have a piece of ballasted track straight onto your plywood or board with no roadbed. And in my opinion, it looks just as good as the real deal. So thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe and stay tuned for more tutorials from Forest Creek Railway. Thank you very much.